Well, slight correction. Next speakers, as we have it, the next session is Startup Tales, as we're continuing the storytelling format today. And the topic is reinventing to survive and grow. So we got two interesting speakers, in fact, three for this session, but we'll start with inviting two of them first. The first one of this duo is ironically a Bachelor of Engineering. That's how he puts it, with a smiley. Yeah. So who couldn't bear to stick to the norm, so he started his career with animation studios, writing code to make things possible in animation and work for Jadu Works. He worked in Reliance Big Animation and then decided to start on his own. So 2 years of mobile app development, and then he applied to the Morpheus gang, and then that sort of kick-started his entrepreneurial journey. Smashers, please welcome on stage Mahadevan from Radio Float. Well, there's one more part about him that I'm going to share after both of them are on stage. The next one is his co-founder, Sikand Gopalakrishnan, who's born in Calicut, schooled in Nigeria. I think he has a Nigerian hairdo also. I don't know. Graduated in fine arts. He used to be a freelance illustrator at major agencies, and he sort of caught up this flash animation bug and co-founded Radio Float. So ladies and gentlemen, please, big round of applause for Sikand Gopalakrishnan. And the other part that I missed is, both of them. So I was chatting with Sikand outside, and he said, we got to talk less and play more. So both of them are going to actually speak very little. And in the evening, they're going to do a smash-up jam for us, where they're going to sort of jam with us. They're also musicians, they run their own band, and they're getting a couple of other band members. Almost. That's not a Nigerian scam, right? Okay. So over to you, Sikand and Mahadevan, and would be great to hear your story, and you could please take the stage and start. Thanks.
Can I stand here?
Please.
Yeah, cool. So that
you stand, I'll walk around.
So that balls don't hit me.
Okay.
Start. Maha will tell you.
Yeah, so I think two small tidbits to introduce myself. I'm a lot of what my grandfather was, and he's a hardcore metallurgist into a lot of research and all. So, I remember my parents telling me that when I was 3 years old, I used to run around with a spanner, near the scooter going, e-church. This is like research, right? The other thing I'd like to say about myself is the first product I made was in my 7th standard. Basically, there was this cartoon slides in the house, which was made of cellophane, and you had to project it to see it. So if you had to read the text, it was all upside down. So I made a small projector, and I think what my mom liked most about it was I had used a push button, and I had kind of stitched it into the cardboard box to open and close it. So that's a little about me.
Yeah, he was into metallurgy, I was into metal. And I can say that. And I'm not used to staying on stage without a guitar, so. There's one guitar. You want me to play or sing? So you don't want me to talk, right? Okay, the rest is about Radio Float. I think you should tell him about how Radio Float came out. Our first product? No, explain.
So, I think Sikand and me first met at Jadu Works.
Jadu Works, yes. We were in the same band.
And again, the connection there was music. And that's how I came to know Sikand, because there was this whole rumor in the office like, oh my god, there's this awesome guitarist around. And then I had to oh my god, who's this guy? And then that's how we actually met each other. And then after that, of course, we did projects there for Disney. There were projects for Warner that Sikand worked on, which is all animation related. Then, Sikand and me actually went two different ways.
Yeah, I went on to form a rock band in Kerala. Unfortunately, the vocalist committed suicide, so that was the end. Yeah. And then he called me to join him and do some graphic design for his apps. And then we decided, what did we decide?
We decided that
More balls, please.
No, actually, services didn't work out for us. It was too complicated.
That's
to do
what I was
for
looking
someone
for.
else. It was really complicated. So we were ramming a lot of different ideas, and Sikkim was had some ideas like, hey, why not replace the school bag with an iPad? And we had various different ideas, but then we pitched this one idea. God knows why, but we pitched the idea of a location-based reminder. So basically, it works like this on your phone. You set a reminder at a grocery store, you mark the grocery store and you say, hey, I need to pick up veggies here. And the next time you pass by your grocery store, the app would give you a reminder. So that is a concept which we pitched to Morpheus. And yeah, so that is the idea on which Morpheus picked us up and said, hey, this sounds like a cool idea. And we started off with developing the app for that.
And then, yeah, we got bored, right?
So what happened was we developed the product in 15 days. We launched it. There were people using it. Guys came up with all kinds of ideas. You can do a treasure hunt with this. Oh my God, leave all kinds of virtual notes all over the place. Do this, do that. But at the end of it, we were bored, man.
Yeah.
We had sales. There were people who were listening. There were people who were using the app. But we were not connecting to it. We're like, what the hell are we building? Right? I think the biggest problem there was, it wasn't really something that impacted people's lives. And I think that is where we were like, okay, we're offering this great convenient service for people, but hey, how is it really going to help, man? I mean, we're supposed to be, changing the world, doing something awesome and all that. So at some point we spoke to Samir about this. And
everything changed in 15 minutes. Like,
so Samir said, hey, for 20 years, you guys, the common connection is music. And what are you doing about it?
and instantly it became Radio Float. It's it's a platform for upcoming musicians, and not just upcoming, we have established artists too. So, and it's on iPhone, Android, web. So you can check it out. It's called radiofloat.com. And we have over 250, 300 artists from all over India, all languages, all genres, metal, again, fusion, rock,
Classical.
electronica, and classical.
Yeah. And how there are a couple of things about it. One is it's pre-curated, so basically you just have to switch on a channel and you're getting awesome music. You don't have to worry about how good it is or how not good it is. And the second part is actually the part where it helps musicians, is that what we want to do is we want to be a framework where artists can market themselves, reach audiences, and monetize through us directly. Right? Which means they don't have to go to a radio anymore, which doesn't pay royalties. They don't have to go to that record label and pay them 10 lakhs to distribute CDs and then never get nothing. And a lot of other really nasty things about the music industry right now. So I think that's where it stands.
Any questions? No balls? Oops, sorry.
This is what happened to them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, that's all.
But before we get with the next speaker, where's Sikant? Okay, so you know what we usually do, why you didn't get your t-shirt, I'm going to explain that to you. Usually what we do is after the speaker finishes, there's a Q&A. And after the Q&A, the speaker picks up the favorite question. And the person with the favorite question gives the t-shirt to the speaker. Now the problem is there is no Q&A. So let's reverse this and you pick up the best pitch from what you've seen. And we'll get that guy to give you a t-shirt. How's that? Adult diaper? Is that your favorite? Is the adult diaper your favorite pitch? Which was your favorite pitch? On a serious note, yeah.
The Examify one was great.
Examify, the smasher, the previous smasher, Samudra Neelam Bhuyan. All right, please come on over. If you could just step out for a minute. So I would request Samudra to hand you. So we've donated on your behalf to the Avsara Foundation. So there's this letter that speaks more about the donation, and of course we've got the cool Smash Up T-shirts as a token of appreciation. Thanks a lot, and can we have a picture, please? Yeah. Thank you. Can we have a yay moment T-shirts? Yay! Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll continue the startup tales, reinventing to grow and reinventing to survive. We've got our next speaker, Karan Bahal from Pretty Secrets. Now that's an interesting story. He's been a veteran in this business where he's been running a lingerie store, a chain of stores in the brick and mortar format, and somehow had the courage to actually, stop all the successful scaling up that he did with the brick and mortar format, and now launched a .com in the e-commerce format to scale this up. So that's one story of, inventing the whole business model. Check. To scale and grow. So without further ado, if I could invite on stage Karan Bahal. Come on guys, show some energy. Where are the balls? Okay, that's going to be a surprise for you. But this is the Facebook, this is the equivalent of the Facebook like button. So if you get it, don't mind it. No offense. You're taking this one?
Yeah. First of all, sorry I'm late. Big traffic jam on the highway. So, I was introduced, I come from a brick and mortar retail background. I want to tell you a little bit about my background, then you'll see how it's pertinent to, I think, the topic that's on the floor today. So I come from a family business. My parents are self-made. They built a fairly large business exporting, manufacturing and exporting apparel to Europe for the last 30 years. The company employs about 400 people, and also I'm their only son.
Bachelor alert.
Okay. I should have one person just because there are going to be a lot of balls coming. So yet for me, joining the family business has never been an option. I made this decision after I finished college, and I've stuck to it. I started out on my own entrepreneurial path about 8 years ago, and I was determined to make it on my own. Like any entrepreneur, in the last 8 years, there've been some highs and some really bad lows. The temptation to fall back on the family business has always been there, but I've never succumbed to it. My journey really has been about constant reinvention. At several points in my career, I've taken really, really large risks and made huge pivots, as you'll see, once I tell you more. All with the goal of really adapting to take advantage of the opportunity as I discovered it. So the way I've structured it really is my 3 pivots, right? So here goes. I left home when I was 10 years old, studied at a boarding school 1,500 kilometers away from my home. And this was in a time, of course, without mobile phones and email. So fighting my own battles is something that I was used to fairly young. After spending 9 years at boarding school, I went to college in the US, again on my own, and then right out of college, I came back and joined the family business like any good Indian son. But realized very quickly that it was something that didn't require me, and more importantly, didn't inspire me. However, in my short stint manufacturing apparel, I realized that there was a serious market for these products in India itself, and moved to Bombay 8 years ago, started a ladies' nightwear brand called Pretty Secrets. Started with one, so this was my first big pivot, right? So I moved from manufacturing background into, say, a retail brand. Started with one store, I was 23 years old, me, a sales girl, and a PN. In 3 years we grew, we started supplying to about 250 other points of sale. So we were supplying the Pretty Secrets brand through, mom and pop retailer in Visakhapatnam, through every Shoppers Stop or, Central or all the other large format stores. The reason really for me to make this pivot was that I saw a really large opportunity in the market, an opportunity for the kind of products that we were capable of making, and something that really interested me. However, what happened, business was growing fairly steadily, growing pretty well. But at about 250 points of sale, we hit a ceiling. Largely, I mean, I don't know if, I'm sure some of you are familiar with retail, but largely it was because the market is largely unorganized. So whilst there was, our customers were out there, there simply weren't enough point of sales. And that really got me thinking. And I said, again, I was 26 by this time and growing at 20% again, which was unacceptable. So I looked at that market and I saw, if we're facing this problem, then so are all the other brands. And that was pivot number 2, which was going into the retail front of it. So what I did then was I launched my second business, which was a chain of lingerie stores called Lace. This was a multi-brand lingerie store. Again, there was an opportunity in the market. We were facing problems. I figured so was everybody else. Opened 10 of those stores. Not only sold our own brand, but roped in all the other big lingerie brands in the country. This was basically the second vertical within the business. Once the stores were doing well, in 2009, as you all know, brick and mortar retail was probably the worst time for brick and mortar retail, 2009 through 2011. Retail real estate went to a point where it really wasn't rational anymore. And there was also a huge, decline in consumer sentiment. So even though the format was doing well, it didn't make sense at that point to open more of those multi-brand stores. So at that point, I just sat tight and I run these 2 verticals of the business. It was fairly good because we were vendors from Pretty Secrets and we were also retailers from Lace. This is the time when again, back to growing 20%. So I actually thought that why not go online? This was before really the online e-commerce boom, or what you may call it. Maybe this was about two years ago. And I started a chain of, an online site called MyLace. Essentially took all the experience that we had in Lace and Pretty Secrets, leveraged that and launched that. This is now pivot number 3. 3 months into running MyLace, I actually found that the opportunity selling lingerie online was far bigger than all the retail that we had done. Our customers were more than happy to buy our product, and we could far better control really, the customer experience and the supply chain. So I've asked myself that why do I need the retailers if I can do this on my own? Essentially all this while, I don't know if you're familiar with how retail is structured, but between you and retailer, there's distributor, agent, shopkeeper, shopkeeper's wife, his neighbor, and his dog. So we essentially said that, if we go e-commerce, then it's only ones and zeros between us. And I actually at that point took a really big call. I decided to actually shut my entire offline business, which at that point was supplying to 250 stores, and we're running 10 of our own multi-brand stores. This was April in last year. The company at that point employed about 150 people. And I essentially shut all of that, and that's why I qualify, I suppose, as startup, because I started a new company with 10 employees. People thought I was absolutely nuts. I think there were 2 trade magazines also who wrote articles about how crazy I am. Essentially because this was a business that was doing well, and I decided to just pivot everything into online. The idea was, I think some of them said that why shut an 8-year-old business with significant traction to start fresh with nothing? I take objection to the word nothing because I knew that I wasn't starting out with nothing. I had 8 years of experience in manufacturing, retailing, vendor management, supply chain, customer service, and marketing. And all of this in the same domain, which was lingerie. And most of all, we had a brand in Pretty Secrets that stood for quality and style and had certain following, and I could take that online. So I knew that if we play our cards right, we could create a formidable brand. Doing it online only meant that there would be relatively lesser barriers and a larger addressable market. And more so, our fate would be really in our own hands. The new company was funded by a group of investors last year, led by the IAN, the Indian Angel Network, and Harvard Business School alumni, and Oreos. And we took that money to relaunch under PrettySecrets.com and essentially became India's first and only online lingerie brand. Since October through now, we've grown at about 450%. Our catalog has more than 500 private label products today. That's actually more products than the top 5 offline lingerie brands combined. Our aspirations are nothing short of being the largest lingerie brand in India in the next 3 or 5 years, and I'm fairly convinced that we can do that probably quicker. At times I wonder if this will all pay off, but I never worry. Because for me, the primary motivation is not the end really, but it's everything in between from now till then in the journey. The experiences I've had, the people I've met, the challenges I've faced, have already made me a far more interesting person than I ever thought I could be. And for me, that really is success. I mean, that's winning more than anything else. My advice to fellow startups. Always look at the bigger picture. I mean, and don't worry about failing. I mean, the experience on failing is far more enriching in succeeding, because in failing, you know what you did wrong. Whereas succeeding, often I've seen people who are just plain lucky or have good timing. Thank you.
Our house open to questions for Karan. Can we see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can we have someone pass the mics? We'll start with here since it's the closest.
Hey, Karan, right here.
Hi.
Hi. So my name's Vineet, and I have a quick question for you. Now, you at one point were running 10 retail stores and doing a lot of other vendor. I mean, as a vendor, you were supplying, right? I mean, what made you just shut it down? That's what you said. You closed it. I mean, weren't there other avenues? Couldn't you have sold it off or let someone else manage it? What made you shut it down?
Well, 2 things really. One, like I said, I hit a point where in both the businesses that I pivoted, for me it was growing at 20%. So for me, at the first time was when I was 26, the second time when I was 30, and growing at 20% was never an option. I mean, and there's so many challenges in that offline business really. Why I didn't, sell that business and such is, I sort of answered that in my speech, that I actually took that offline brand and I made it online exclusive. So I took the IP, the brand loyalty that I created, then I took it. So I couldn't have got rid of it. But also what I saw was that 7-8 years of doing retail, the traction, let alone how many people we reached. Let's just say the revenues that we were clocking right now. And I've started the online about 6 months ago. 6 months from now, we'll be at that same run rate.
Hi. You mentioned that through online sales you realized or you understood the consumer experience better and you were able to make most of whatever consumer behavior was. I've walked into a Lay's store and I've seen the promises that they make. They help you decide on right design, fit, etc. How did you replicate that experience online? Because it's a very, very personal thing. Wasn't it difficult, a complete shift over from brick and mortar to online for something as personal as lingerie?
Sure. So actually, I didn't say that I'm getting the experience online. I actually got the experience offline. It's very, very hard to really, I mean, you can measure page views and, conversion rates and heat maps online, but like you correctly said, you can't understand the customer. To give you an idea, all our customer service helpline people are not BPO employees. They're all store managers from our old stores. Because more often than not, more of the calls are about what lingerie to buy as opposed to track my shipment or I want to return this order. How really we try and alleviate some of those concerns online is try and make the online experience as similar to the offline one as possible. That being said, so, of course, whether it's payment modes or advice or the UI, UX, it's all geared towards, of course, you can't replicate a brick and mortar store, but get it as close to it as possible. But what's important to understand is you mentioned a lace store, right? So you've been to those stores. And in my experience of the 250 stores that we were supplying to when we wound up, less than 50 of them had trial rooms. Less than 30 of them had female sales staff, right? So India is not Lace or Shoppers Stop. It's far bigger than that. And, there you don't even see product. So the experience offline is so poor. I mean, there's no touch feel, there's no advice, there's no fit, right? 93% of women in India are wearing the wrong size lingerie and they're buying offline. So you're actually, the offline experience is so poor that you can really better it online. I got that one. Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, my question is again to the first question which was asked. Why did you close the offline model? So when you stopped that and you started this online, did you lose some market share in the interim, or you just didn't feel the pinch at all?
In market share, you mean in terms of revenue?
I mean revenue. Now you're saying you are almost there. But in that 6 months time, did you see somebody else getting into that space and things like that?
Well, see, so offline and online is very, very different, right? I mean, offline doing it for 8 years, 250 points of sale, and we were covering 32 cities, right? And online, in 6 months, we've shipped out 20,000 orders, and we've covered about 340 different cities. So, believe it or not, but I've probably created a larger brand online in 6 months than I did 8 years offline. To give you an idea, think of this as walk-ins in a store, right? I mean, let's say Big Mall, In-Orbit Mall, Malad. We've got a Lace store there. On a weekend, good weekend, you'll see 100, 150 walk into a store, into one store. Even at this early stage, we get 25,000 visitors a day online. So, there's just no comparison. Yeah.
Do you actually think that, when you actually pivot and shut down an 8-year-old venture,
sure.
You go through that crisis of confidence in the industry where everybody says that, look, you probably, they're too unreliable people to do business with. I mean, all of a sudden, rival in the industry.
Trade or consumer?
Trade, probably.
You should, sure. So you should have that ability. You should be sure that you can do that, right? That you can take that. Like I said, they thought I'm nuts. So they knew that the offline business was successful. But, people will say what they'll say. End of day, it's the consumer that decides. And also for us, we're largely private label. So we do a lot of the manufacturing ourselves. Suppliers are not brands, right? So they're manufacturers. They're okay as long as you pay them and you pick up product. So, for us, it was interesting because when we pivoted, it wasn't because the offline was doing badly. However, you're right, some people did make that assumption, but it didn't hurt us at all.
Hello. Ravindra here. If you see in the retail market, most of the large retails, they have gone on online format and they are doing both of the things parallelly. And secondly, in the morning session, it was said most of the large online portals or the e-commerce sites, they would get into brick and mortar and they would, have a physical stores. Your assumptions, or of course, you have been very successful and you have 25,000 hits. But why going for one particular thing? Because the thoughts of the market is going both ways. Because target audience happens to be different. Online targets market is different and the offline market is different. So why you only went for online, and why you just ignored and shut the shop? Again, many people have asked for, because the market happens to be different for offline people.
Okay, so I think your second question I already answered, but your first one I'll answer in two parts. One, you said that the online and offline customer is different. That's a huge misconception, right? If you say the online customers are different, where are they still buying a majority of their products, or where were they buying before this? That's the fundamental, I think, mistake most e-commerce players make, is thinking that this is a different animal, a person who's buying online. I think it's actually people with offline efficiencies who will be far better served to service the online model, because these are not, I mean, no offense to anybody in the room, but it's not tech or marketing expertise which help you scale, right? It's actually domain expertise, supply chain, and so on. Your first part of the question was that, when everybody is trying to go offline and online, why online only? The primary difference is that the people you speak of are horizontal plays. So these are multi-brand. You're probably referring to, say, a Shopper Stop or in a Globus, and then you're referring to Myntra and FirstCry and so on, right? So these are multi-brand horizontal plays. They're not offering you anything unique by way of product, as opposed to someone like us who's a online lingerie label. We're a private label product, right? So not only are you essentially we're building a brand, right? And at this point, e-commerce is the simplest way to reach our customer. So it's very different for private label versus horizontal plays. I think even for the Myntras of the world, if they do go offline, it's more just pressure to take market share at this point. But that's not a sustainable long-term strategy. They'll get killed by the likes of Big Bazaar and and Shopper Stop and so on.
Quick question. What are some of the ugly secrets of, not pretty secrets, but
ugly secrets,
some of the competitors, especially, there's suddenly so many people trying to sell all kinds of garments and shoes and shirts. And I just saw an ad of them telling you on, I don't know which site was that, they'll deliver the clothes to you at home, you try it on, then somebody, right? So, I mean, what if Myntra starts delivering underwear to people at home and, how do you counter that?
Can I do that? So essentially what you're highlighting is probably the biggest problem with e-commerce. That's irrational competition, right? So we are here running a business model that makes sense. Yeah, so these are the ugly secrets, right? So the ugly secret is you get funded $80 million, you don't know what to do with it, and you'll start undercutting the market, right? We actually had a retailer who was an online retailer buying our product from our site at full price, right, at MRP, listing it on his site at a 20% off. So essentially losing like 50%. But that retailer just went bust just like a month ago. I'm not telling you. Yeah, far away.
Okay, one last question. The man has stood up. No ragging, Kanchan. No ragging. Okay, one for the co-host.
Alright, so 8 years and 3 pivots. There must be some strong motive that every time you go out and sell lingeries.
Karan? Like he said, because I sit in my office and I have just lingerie models around me all day. I mean, there's like one my left. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Karan. Just one question for you.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. What is the largest give us a reference to context of this market. What is the largest in the world in this market?
Victoria's Secrets.
And that, no, online.
Yeah. Victoria's Secrets direct.
No, but I know can you break it down? Victoria's Secrets online with offline? It's also online.
Oh yeah. So Victoria's Secrets currently is about $5.6 billion in revenue. 1.6 billion come online.
And if they didn't have that brand offline, would they be able to do 1.6 billion online?
Probably not. But to give you an idea, 1.6 billion online is 13% of the total lingerie market in the US, not online, offline combined. So even if they did half, it would be 5% of the offline market. So you just crunch those numbers, it's crazy.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Karan. And before you take leave, I'd like you to pick the prettiest question that you that you faced from the audience. Or
probably that
ugliest.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Bear Shop.
He's actually exposed the ugly secrets of pretty secrets.
You exposed Tehelka.
That's why so motivated to come to work.
So I'll request Puneet Sharma, you please wait on the stage to give you the token of appreciation. So we've donated on your behalf very soon to the Avsara Foundation. So there's a letter of appreciation and a smash-up t-shirt for you. Thanks a lot, Karan Dayal. Big round of applause. Please show some energy.